Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome to this meeting of the Integration Joint Board. I rule that under Standing Order 5.6, online participation has been enabled for this meeting to allow members of the IJB and officers to attend remotely. Members of the local media are also in attendance via remote link. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be published online for public access after the meeting. And can all participants online please switch off their cameras and mute their microphones when not speaking. If you need to speak on any point, please use the raise hand function in Teams or indicate your wish to speak by signalling on your camera or taking your microphone off mute. Officers are reminded to follow the protocols that have been separately issued with regard to their participation. And before we start the meeting, can I please ask the committee officer to do a roll call for members of the IJB online to confirm they are present.
Thank you. Mr. Carroll.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Campbell.
Good afternoon, present.
Ms. Haswell.
Present.
And for non-voting members, Mr. Williamson.
Present.
Ms. Morgan.
Present.
Dr. Evans. I'll mark anyone as apologies if they're not present at this time. And Ms. Anderson. Mr. Sandilands. Ms. Gens.
Present.
Ms. Hand.
Present.
Mrs. Adamson.
Present.
Mr. Guyan.
Present.
Ms. Campbell. No. And would you like me to do apologies?
Yes, please.
Apologies from Mr. Armitage, Dr. Armitage, sorry, and from Mrs. Tulloch from Vass, and Mary McFarlane.
Okay, thank you very much. Please will now move on to the agenda. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, if any arise through the meeting, just let me know. Okay, then we will move on to agenda item 1, and that's the financial monitoring report to the 31st of December 2021, and Carl is going to take us through that one.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So this report has already been to the Audit Committee just before this meeting, so I'll keep this relatively brief. This is the monitoring report up to the end of December 21. Current projections are an overspend on IJB Commission Services of 3.85 million. 871,000 of that overspend relates to SIC delivered services and 2.98 million relates to NHS services. The NHS overspend can be split between 1.8 million on directly managed services and 1.2 million on acute hospital services. That's the set-aside budget. The projected overspend is shown by surface area in Appendix 1, and that starts on page 9 of your packs. This appendix also has the explanations for each variance. But to summarise, it's primarily due to agency staff across the various service areas. There's actions being taken to address these overspends. So in nursing and midwifery, that's mainly the set-aside budget. This is the largest staff group employed by NHS Shetland, and it's seen on average 15 whole-time equivalent vacancies on average since 2008. And there was a sharp rise in vacancies up to 30 in mid-2020 due to the extra posts required for COVID measures and an increase in retirements. The actions taken in this area is using agency staff as a short-term measure to maintain safe staffing levels. There's been supported access into nursing through the distance learning Open University programme, including new fields of practice such as paediatrics. We've worked with RGU to offer return to practice programmes to support former practitioners back into nursing. We've worked with University of Highlands and Islands to offer a shortened midwifery undergraduate programme with local learning and clinical placements. We've started to scope out options to support international graduates to come and work in the UK, and that's in collaboration with other NHS partners. And then we're offering a career pathway for healthcare support workers, which includes preparation for a nursing, midwifery and allied health professionals or healthcare science career locally. Mental health, we've been spending a lot of money on locums in that area, but we're out for advert for a consultant psychiatrist, and that has a closing date of the 27th of February. So hopefully that'll result in something positive. And we're also looking to do a test of options for CPN models to cover out of hours. And the mental health improvement plan and the mental health strategy is currently being updated. And I understand that'll be back to the IJB in due course. And then primary care, we've had locum use right across the surface for a lot of years now, but there has been a new GP recruited to Bray, and that's been in post since the 17th of January. It does still leave 0.6 whole-time equivalent to fill. Scalawa, there's a new GP started on the 31st of January, but unfortunately there's been another resignation, so that's been one in, one out. Bixter, there's a new GP being appointed to do 2-3 month sessions per year, but that still leaves 6 months to cover. And then the Yale practice is still vacant, and that needs to be re-advertised. So we're looking at options, as the current post has it's no proven attractive. And then SIC delivered services, they're continuing to look at alternative methods of recruitment to attract people to hard to fill posts. And that includes modern apprenticeships, relocation packages and revised job descriptions. So despite the projected overspend, IJB is a separate legal entity will again break even, because we're going to get this top-up payments for NHS and SIC, but that top-up payments is not sustainable, and we really do need to progress the change project so that the services is less reliant on this high-cost agency staff. Happy to take any questions on this report. Thanks.
Thanks very much. I'll open it up for questions. Don?
Thank you. Carol, I'm delighted to hear that there's an advert out for a consultant psychiatrist, and I hope that that proves to be successful. Can you please tell me what the difference in cost will be to the IJB of securing that permanent appointment compared to the ongoing employment of a locum?
Yeah, the commentary in the paper, if you look at the mental health section, the psychiatry locum has cost our $500,000 extra to the cost of a substantive locum. So if we get substantive psychiatrists in place, we should be able to live within our budget.
Okay, I'm not understanding, because I'm guessing that the cost of the locum is the 5.6 is the 0.562 million. But what I'm trying to establish is that what will the difference in cost be between having a substantive post and employing a locum?
Well, the 562 is the overspend. So the budget is based on the cost of a substantive staff. So the overspend of 562 is the difference.
If I just come in, the service is budgeted for 2 substantive consultant psychiatrists. So at the minute, the locum is only bridging one of those gaps. So that's why there's a cost above and beyond, because we have one person in the post at a substantive rate who's working for NHS Shetland, and then the other post has been gapped by locums, which is then that additional cost on above what the service. So the service is budgeted for 2 consultants, and it's above that.
Go on, Don.
Maybe I'm not the brightest chap. Let's break it down. What would the cost at IJB be if we didn't have to employ locums and just for a psychiatrist? Two psychiatrists.
The cost would be what we've got in the budget. I can get you that figures in the next few minutes if you want, John.
All right, I'll give you a phone afterwards to get my head around this, so I don't hold everybody else up, because maybe I'm just being really sick. But
no, it's all right, John. We can catch up on that after. But the 562,000 is the cost above the cost of the budgeted 2 psychiatrists that Brian spoke about.
So that answers my question. So the £562,000 is over and above what we would expect to be spending on the 2 substantive posts.
That's right.
So the one locum psychiatrist is costing £562,000.
Right.
It's not, it's one locum post. It's so there's a variety coming through. So it's one post that we have a variety of locums coming into. It's not just one locum.
Okay, right, thank you.
I know there's a bit of semantics in that, but it's not just one person. We have a rotational model for that locum post.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Anybody else have any questions? I'll maybe ask questions then. It's not a finance paper unless I ask an awkward question. I suppose the question is probably going to be slightly difficult, and maybe Brian might want to take it and let Carl off the hook. But at what point do we stop focusing on trying to recruit? And we've tried many, many different ways to recruit, and we've had lots of success, but not enough to step away from our over-reliance on agency staff and locums. At what point do we stop that being our main focus and our focus to become looking at how do we change our services so that we can sustain them with the people that we do have here? And how do we redesign services so that we can actually run them without all these additional costs? Because at some point, we're not going to be able to access all these agency staff and locums, because there will come a point where we run out of people. So when do we make that change of actually focusing our energies on how are we going to start doing things differently? I'll go to Brian first.
Thanks, Chair. So I think we're actually at that point because we have got some work streams on the go, particularly one that springs to mind is the multidisciplinary team working, which is looking away at sharing out that the individuals in the right professional, and it's not necessarily a doctor or a GP. So that's why we're, I'm making sure that people are doing, seeing the right professional for what they're actually engaging the service for. Hence why we're looking at healthcare support workers. We've looked at changing the workforce profile in our non-doctor islands as well. So I think we're at that point where we can't recruit the post, so we're thinking of doing things differently. And maybe the success in that is just where we are with Skerries, where we've had a conversation with the community and we've changed the model there, and it's not actually, it's a new model. It will hopefully be a cheaper model, so that has driven us into changing the model. So I think we're actually at that point where we're trying things differently, because we have been forced into that, aspect that we can't recruit into those areas. So I think it's an ongoing thing, because I think there's that we will need to sustain some form of agency work staff, workforce to keep our services safe and of quality. But that being said, as you say, as you're quite correctly saying, we can't sustain that. So I think we are actually at that stage now where we're trying things differently. To try and skill mix and appropriate kind of clinician. So yeah, I think we're there.
Thanks. Do you want to add anything, Carl?
No, thanks. Brian has covered it.
Thank you. Robbie?
Sorry, can I presume to partially answer your question rather than ask a question? Carol's already drawn attention to the CPNs covering out of hours. There's good examples in practice of advanced nurse practitioners, and you would be disappointed if I didn't draw your attention to the fact that pharmacists are taking clinics within the health centre. So what you're asking the question about is already being carried out at the moment, and I think there's tremendous scope. So maybe there is a question there, what scope is there to move this further in the short term rather than the general question that you asked?
So I think that contribution was really useful, Councillor McGregor, and the fact that, that's exactly kind of where we're trying to shift that away from being a service-led thing to, you know, diversification. I think one area where we've had a lot of focus quite recently is on urgent care and out of hours care. You know, there is a feeling where you know, we have a lot of people on call right around Shetland and the Outer Isles areas as well. So, you know, is that something we could be doing more efficiently moving forward? So we have taken on a work stream in collaboration with the NHS PMO just to review urgent care and all the different work streams just around that, mental health being one, for example, that you've touched on. Pharmacy will be involved in that, as well as primary care, acute, accident emergency, all those kind of areas as well. So again, I think we're there. We're starting to have those conversations about how we actually change that, because we can't sustain, or certainly if we do, it's at a higher cost.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions for Carol? No? Okay, thanks very much, Carol. We'll move to debate. And Lincoln, this was an audit committee just before. I wonder if you want to give us an update on what was discussed there.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I suppose just really a lot of what was discussed here was in the conversations, the challenges of recruitment right across the board in the IJB, which are national issues right throughout Scotland. So that's, you know, that's a challenge in all areas, and looking at different ways of developing services. The other thing was around accommodation and, you know, the opportunities for people who want to move here then not being able to get accommodation. So that's a real challenge and not something that can be fixed in the short term. So there was quite a bit of discussion around that, but there was nothing in the report that was not unknown already. The challenges that we faced. I think one of the things that Jane brought up was around how settled some of the staff are in other areas that we don't sort of pay much attention to, because they do sort of come under budget or on budget. So a little bit of the positive feedback, I suppose, moving forward. So that's something we were going to look at for the audit committee, around some of the positive stories that we hear as well. And I guess talking about how some of our staff, you know, the level of commitment they have to the work that they do over a really challenging period.
Thanks very much, Lincoln. Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make those positive comments, because although we talk financial challenges and recruitment challenges, we don't want to forget that there's an awful lot of good that happens, and people manage to deliver on, you know, really, you know, budgets that are quite tight, but we still provide really, really good services. So I think all our staff are to be praised for what they have managed to achieve over all this time. Has anybody got any other comments on this paper? No, I think, like we said, there's no surprises in this financial monitoring report. I suppose my only real concerns, other than what we've already discussed, are the fact that whilst the focus is on locums and agency costs, and we don't have set targets for savings, and we don't have recovery plans, that's fine. I think that's the right thing to do. But I think we also have to be mindful that we do have to focus on the financial envelope, because it is only going to get smaller. It's not going to increase. And we know that demands on services are increasing. So we do have to look at how we do things differently. But are we all happy to note the management accounts? Yeah. Okay. That's item 1, and we'll move on to agenda item 2, which is the draft Joint Strategic Commissioning Plan 2022 to 2025, and that's Elizabeth.
Hello, Chair. Thank you very much. This follows on very much from what you've just said around needing to do things differently, the financial context that we find ourselves in, and post-pandemic, I suppose, and all the developments that have happened during that time. So we had a joint strategic commissioning plan from 2019 to 22, and it is now due for review. But on reviewing that plan, we felt that it stood us in very good stead. It has, I mean, there's so much evidence that we have integrated in a way that we hadn't previously, and I think we're demonstrating that in so many different ways. But there's something about moving on from that to actually demonstrating more in terms of outcomes, to involving our community, our population more in supporting people to look after themselves, to working with our communities, to understanding what the financial framework is likely to be, and to develop a very agile plan that will allow us to not just react but work proactively in terms of some of the elements that might that are coming over the horizon in terms of the National Care Service, for example. So the strategic planning group has been working on developing a new strategic commissioning plan. We've got needs assessment work that is partially completed, not entirely completed yet, but it's well and truly underway. We have been, we had a seminar with the IJB, and we've got another seminar next week on the strategic commissioning plan. We're aiming for something, and this is the general feedback that we've had, is that we want something quite short and succinct and easily accessible. So the plan is that the strategic commissioning plan will look quite different to the previous one in terms of the amount of words that it's got in it, and we'll be very much considering how we engage and communicate around the plan, and we'll have a communication engagement strategy that runs alongside this. So at the moment, recognising that there's still quite a lot of consultation to go, a lot of engagement. We've been working very closely with the third sector, and Lynn Tullock is organising for us to go and meet with the third sector forum, which is absolutely brilliant. And we've got the IJB seminar next week, and more time to discuss and develop that. I suppose what we're looking for is it going in the right direction? And so we're not asking for massive discussion at this point, just a sense of whether you think it's going in the right direction, and whether what you think about the structure, the vision, approach, and our strategic priorities at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth. And I think it is clear that the previous plan, we've come a really long way since the start of that plan. And when you look at some of the things that have been achieved in it and the way that people are working, I think it does show the strength of that plan. But I think it's absolutely right that we now move on to that different stage. So I will open up questions. John.
Thank you. So just to clarify, it's just that 1 week today, the IJB will have every opportunity in order to influence the final makeup of the plan. And on the 24th of March, the IJB will have the opportunity to give the final approval just for the plan. Is that correct?
Elizabeth?
Yes, that's the plan, yes.
In that case, Elizabeth, it sounds to me that there's very little questions to ask today, just and because we will be given ample opportunity in order to influence the draft just 1 week today, and it will rest with the IJB to give its final approval, and I'm happy to agree that it's going in the right direction. Just so if it comes to approving, then I'll be happy to propose that to you.
Second.
Yeah, it's just to clarify, a week's time is the seminar, and then it still goes out for further consultation. The actual final approval by IJB is on the final IJB, I think it's 24th of March.
Yeah. And that basis, I'll be happy to approve.
That's the note, so you're okay.
Yeah, okay.
Jim?
just one point on page 29, for the fact 9 of the plan. So we say we're to reduce the avoidable and unfair differences in health and well-being for social groups. I would prefer that to be prevent. Right? The idea is that we treat everybody equally. It doesn't matter what social group they belong to or what ethnic minority they are. Right? And I think to reduce means that we're still of an opinion that we could allow, people, that would discriminate against people.
Do you want to come back on that?
No, that's a very fair point, Jim. Thank you very much. And we could discuss that more next week if that would be helpful.
Certainly, Elizabeth. As I said, I just noticed that when I was reading this, and I just thought that, sort of say that, people that are disadvantaged, should I say, I think reading that, you think that, we've no really sort of taken them into proper consideration. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Wasn't a great line this side, but hopefully you managed to get that, Elizabeth. Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? I've got a couple. I'll maybe just so on the, I don't have page numbers on mine, but on the first page where it says that the new joint strategic plan will be agile in nature, and you've already kind of explained that. I just wondered what will the process be for that? How often will you review this plan?
In discussion with Brian, we thought that we should review it annually anyway, but we did also wonder whether we should start the process earlier. So actually, although it sounds a bit as though we're creating work for ourselves, whether we should actually start reviewing it in September to give us good time before the before the end of the financial year, I suppose, just to try and pull our planning back a bit and give us, really adequate time to make any adjustments. And I mean, it's something that we can explore next week in conversation, but because we're thinking to have quite a tight, high-level strategic plan, what we might want to do is more of a delivery plan that links with our directions. That's a sort of annual update that gives, really clear targets for each year that ties the strategic plan to the directions and allows the IJB to monitor progress against those more easily. But that's just a thought at the moment, but I'd be keen to hear what you think about that, perhaps at our discussion next week.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thanks very much. And I've just got a couple more points. I'll keep my actual questions on the actual plan to next week, but just more around the process, I suppose, my questions. So it goes on to say 2.3 that in normal times this draft would be presented to NHS Board and SIT Policy and Resources Committee before it goes to the next stage. Now, obviously, with timings, that's not going to happen, and it will come after. So I'm assuming it comes on the 16th. Is it coming to Policy and Resources that week of March? So I think it's the 14th.
I'm not sure. I haven't made those arrangements yet, so we'll need to look at what the appropriate dates are for that. Okay, so it was kind of, I suppose, around the process and how we engage with our stakeholders, and I think that's more to be done as an idea in how we inform the wider council membership and the NHS board and the work that we're doing, because I think it's really important that all our partners know what the priorities are, and so that we're all working to the same page. And I know that we are doing that, but I think we need to find better ways to engage as an IJB with the NHS and with the wider
council membership, because I think there's that kind of, in some areas, that perception that that's an IJB thing, but actually, you know, we should all have a little bit more knowledge about what's going on here, because this is really important. So I think we need to be better at getting the message out to people about what's happening, just maybe sharing more information. And I don't think that's something that we've done particularly well so far. I see Christine wants to come in. So Christine.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose it's just to agree obviously with everything you've said, and also in terms of what Elizabeth and Brian and Co are trying to do with this, which is very much to make it a living document and much more user-friendly. But in terms of the specific points you're raising about process, then I think it is really important to engage across the three agencies. And I think that is absolutely the intention through the discussion. So there will be representatives at the seminar next week from across all agencies in effect, because we are very much joined up. And there will, of course, have to be the formal approval by all three parties before the strategic plan can be considered approved, because that is a requirement under the Public Bodies Act. So there is that aspect that will have to be addressed. And clearly in a year when it's a local government election, there is something about the actual timing and how we manage to achieve that. But myself and colleagues in Big Corporate be very happy to discuss that with Brian and Elizabeth and make sure that we cover all the bases in that regard, and also that we check in terms of the regulations and guidance regarding how your new Agile Living document will still fulfil what is the legal requirement of a strategic commissioning plan. And I certainly think that the idea that you can separate out or arrange it differently so that you have the delivery plan that Elizabeth spoke about. I would suggest, Chair, that that is potentially a really good idea, but obviously we can discuss that as well and make sure how that is then explained, presented, and complies with what certainly the Council, NHS and the IJB all need out of it. But I think that the fact that you're sort of having an early look at it today and then the seminar and then engagement through the various groups is all good to give that good information, but we will just have to double check everything behind the scenes to make sure it then is formally approved appropriately in what is an extraordinary year amongst many extraordinary years. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Christine. Yeah, no, I don't envy all the people who have to do the complex process areas of it. We just do the easy bit here, I think. Okay, do we have any further questions? Jane? I think you're on mute, Jane. Sorry.
Yes, I am. Just to pick up on a couple of points there about Elizabeth was asking about the directions, and I think that is the way to go with it, with another plan there. And there's been so much work here to make this document available to us today. And I think that's really important before we go to this seminar, because people have the opportunity to read this before we enter into the seminar. So from a process point of view, I think that's to use this as a model moving forward. If we have a seminar, then having the document, if possible, beforehand is really positive. The language that you've incorporated in here, Elizabeth, is easy to read. There are gaps there where you're going to put data in, and as we all know, the data tends to be written in a very jargonized way. So just urging that the data that comes forward is also equally has your treatment, which you've successfully done throughout the document. And finally, there's been a lot of work increasing the opportunity for people to get involved in feeding back, and I think that's an opportunity for us to go to these groups. And I'm thinking about, forgive me, I can't remember the name of it. I think it's called Patient Experience at Islesborough. Just making sure that we're making sure that all these groups do have the opportunity to feed back in, because I think we've been successful as an IJB of increasing that. But I agree with the chair. This has been a journey, and we're now in a different phase. So thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Elizabeth?
Just wanted to say thank you for those comments, and again it will be more work, but I've got a vision that we will have a written document, but we'll also have other versions that are potentially more understandable to people, you know, depending on their abilities or how they best understand documents. So I'm really keen that we translate this. We have simplified versions, we maybe have some documents with more images in them, but we start off with a written document that we then adapt into different formats for different audiences, and maybe a sort of spoken version as well. But anyway, those are all future ideas, and I'm sure we'll work together to make them real.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth. They all sound really good. It sounds like we're going to be very busy. Do we have any further questions on this? No? Does anybody, thanks very much, Elizabeth. Does anybody have any discussion they want to have around this? I think the points that Jane made about us having the opportunity to really read it well and understand it before we attend that seminar is really helpful, because I've saved all my other questions for then, so that will save us until next week. But it does give everybody an opportunity to read it and just get an idea of what's being proposed, and then we can consider it at our seminar, and then hopefully lots of engagement, and we'll see it back on the 24th of March. So it has been
At 1.1,
yeah.
0.3, I'm happy to move that we approve this draft at Appendix 1 to be used in the consultation phase as outlined at paragraph 2.3.
Happy to second.
I'm happy to second too. Oh, well, that'd be third.
Okay, that's fine, and we're all happy with everything else. That's fine, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 3, which is IJB Medium Term Financial Plan 2022-23 to 2026-2027, and that's Carl.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the update to the IJB Medium Term Financial Plan covering the period 22-23 to 26-27. The previous version attempted to break down the IJB funding into sustainable and unsustainable funding, but in this version we've changed our approach. The SIC and NHS medium-term financial plans are based on a variety of assumptions and external factors, whereas the IJB funding is much more straightforward. It's simply a direct allocation for SIC and NHS. And on that basis, we know that the IJB has been fully funded by SIC and NHS since it began in 2015. And there's no suggestion that this agreement will change over the terms of the plan. There's also no indication at this time that savings targets will be applied, or that the SIC or NHS change projects will impact IJB budgets over the term of the plan. Change projects are in progress, but at this stage there's no indication of any cash release and savings being achieved, which will reduce IJB budgets. The plan therefore assumes full funding for the IJB with growth of 4% on SIC delivered services and 3.5% on NHS delivered services, and that percentage is based on the latest Scottish Government medium-term financial plan for social care. So although we're assuming full funding, we do have to be mindful that the funding partners have their own financial challenges, and we really need to work together to try and help reduce the impact of this high-cost agency staff and to redesign our services where possible to be less reliant on these staff. And as we know from the management accounts, full funding doesn't cover the additional cost pressure of agency staff, which will continue to create overspends against IJB budgets. So the annual planning cycle will incorporate any change projects that will impact budgets for future years, and the medium-term financial plan will be updated accordingly each year. as part of that cycle. And IJB members will be able to influence future budgets and medium-term financial plan updates through seminars, and will be asked to approve any redesign projects that will impact its strategic plan. I recognise there's not been many budget seminars during the pandemic, but that's something we will need to pick up on as things calm down, so you can get real input into this process. And then the National Care Service is going to add further complexity around IJB finances, but until the legislation is introduced, it's prudent to plan on a going concern basis. So that's a summary of this paper, and again, happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Carol. Any questions? Oh, yeah, go for it, Robbie.
Thanks very much, Carol. I've always thought that variances in budgeting were supposed to be exceptional circumstances. I've touched on this in previous discussions that you and I have had. I'm just beginning to wonder if we should have these agency costs in the budget rather than an exception, because they ain't going to go away anytime soon. So I just wonder if you saw any benefit in the medium-term financial plan in adopting that approach.
Yeah, well, I think we've spoken about this in the past, and if we set budgets based on agency costs, that might just encourage us to continue with that model. So I think we're better to set budgets based on substantive staff to try and help the incentive to recruit. And also, if we increase budgets, it just increases the savings targets elsewhere. So it's a difficult balance, but understand your point, because if we know locums is going to be needed for a certain part of the year, then why not set budgets for that? But yeah, I think it just encourages the rank surface models if we set budgets that high. And again, it just puts additional strain on the funding partners, because they'll have to find that money. And I think as a solution, we agreed at budget setting last year that NHS would provide a kind of a ring-fenced contingency budget outside the IJB that would come in and support agency costs. So rather than put it in for the start, they're putting it in at the end. So again, that's a kind of a safety net for this agency costs. But again, as you as IJB members feeds into seminars and that, if that's something you feel strongly about, I think that should be voiced, and again, that would be passed back to the funding partners to consider.
Yeah, my apologies, Carol. I maybe should have waited till the seminars before I brought this up, but I feel quite strongly that the goal's been missed before the kick-off, if you'll forgive the metaphor. But I certainly would like to see a change in that direction, but I'll maybe save my thoughts for a seminar.
Okay, thank you.
Christine? I'm not sure if you know.
Sorry, my turn to be on mute and all those other things. I have to do it at least once in every meeting I attend, so apologies, Chair. We do have regular meetings of the local partnership finance team where we can discuss a range of financial matters, so we can have a further discussion on this at that meeting. However, I think from my perspective, and I think there are other reasons to support the approach that Carl's taking. There is the issue that in actual fact, the cover that has to be provided for vacancies in staffing is very much the responsibility of the individual party that has received the direction. And I suppose in terms of you looking at your medium-term financial plan and what you would intend to spend money on, or the appropriate amount you think should be spent on a service through a direction, would not include agency staff, because that is not what you would be looking for your commissioned services. That's not the cost you would expect your commissioned service to incur in providing that service. You would be expecting them to have that more stable workforce. Now, we all know, and I fully accept Councillor McGregor's point that this has been an ongoing situation for a while, but I think that for the IJB, looking at it purely from the IJB's perspective, you would want to see in your medium-term financial plan that you were putting in there the figures of what you would see as being the appropriate budget cost projected spend on the service, and that wouldn't be at the levels that mean you're having to rely so heavily on agency staff. So I think from your strategic commissioning planning role and from your commissioning and directions role, it's a bit like buying from somebody. You have a price you expect to get something for, and then when they can't provide it at that price and it's a lot higher, that's actually not what you're planning for. You might end up feeling you have to, but I think at the point where you're doing your medium-term financial plan, that I would advise that's not the starting point, and I think those are some of the discussions we can have at local partnership finance teams. So I hope that's helpful, but it's just to say that, you know, we do discuss those things at that meeting and we can continue to discuss it, but I actually think the approach Carl's taking is reasonable. If that's helpful, thank you.
Thanks very much, Christine. We've got John next.
Thank you. This kind of, I suppose it's a follow-up from Robbie. I'd say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And I suppose with our geography and the size of Shetland, then locums are going to be a requirement, just ongoing. So that's just the reality. And I understand where both Robbie and Christine are coming from with regard to budgeting suitably for the inevitable locum costs, or having, as Carl put forward, a contingency budget, which seems to be a kind of a reasonable compromise between the two. However, from take that to the next level, has consideration ever been given to, for the more senior clinical roles, and entering into service level agreements with other health boards within Scotland, where agreed fixed price for any potential local cover is paid, and that payment is paid whether or not that services are utilised?
Do you want to take that, Brian?
I'm not sure that's one for Carl. Certainly, we have service level agreements with other partners like NHS Grampian that provide servicing clinicians along those lines. So that's with another health board or another partner that we would have that agreement. Is the question regarding whether we do that with individual clinicians who are working in Shetland?
No, what I'm looking at, and I'm going to use a hypothetical scenario here. Say that it's a requirement to have 2 whole-time equivalent anaesthetists in Shetland, and just but we struggle to a point just due to a relatively small pool of available suitably qualified staff to apply for such a post. But the service level agreement has been entered into with Lothian, NHS Lothian, whereby if such a situation were to occur, whereby we were struggling to have a anaesthetist, why did I choose that particular? If we were struggling to fill an anaesthetist's post, that they would provide just a cover from within their existing resource. But the setup would be is that we would pay them just an annual fee, which we can therefore readily for budget into a medium-term financial plan. We'll pay them an annual fee if we use that service, and if we don't. So therefore it can be perhaps mutually beneficial to both NHS Lothian and to NHS Shetland, whereby we have a very fixed picture of what our budget allocation is going to be, and there's a very fixed income for NHS Lothian, NHS Lothian have identified that they may be able to surrender such a resource for a limited period of time to help Shetland, and Shetland has that comfort that these posts will always be filled, just if the need were to arise.
I'm not sure, it's something I need to take a while and have a think about, or do a bit of research into whether we've done that for individual posts on Shetland. I certainly know we've done that for visiting services, entered into service level agreement for provision of services, but I'm not sure that's for provision of individuals. I certainly know there's been conversations nationally using single sort of providers for elements of workforce, for example, nursing. Whether that's through international recruitment or something along those lines, but that's been led by a single kind of health board, in pulling that together. So I think there has been some kind of maybe examples of that, but I need to get into detail to maybe answer that question more fully and more accurately.
It's maybe the most ridiculous idea under the sun. I'm quite happy to be told if that's the case. But we're told that we have to be creative and look at ways of going forward.
It's the pressures with it being nationally. It'd be whether other health boards be able to supply individuals to provide that continuity of care. That might be a real constraint on that as a way forward.
Thanks, John. I've got one question, Carol. So we know that the medium-term financial plan says that the IJB is likely to receive full funding from both their partners, but we also know both partners are facing financial challenges going forward, and that is not probably going to get any better. How do we, as an IJB, stay mindful of this fact? So if we're constantly seeing that we don't have to worry about it because it's okay, how do we ensure that we keep that at the forefront of our minds? Actually, this is a problem for our partners, therefore it has to be a problem for us. Because it worries me somewhat that if we're seeing financial plans that say everything's okay, which is obviously a good thing, and I'm glad that we're fully funded from our partners. However, I'm also aware that those financial pressures are continually going to be felt. So how do we as an IJB make sure we stay focused on that and we don't sit back and say, well, it's fine because they'll just give us more money? Because at one point that might not be forthcoming. So how do we keep that at the forefront of our minds?
Yeah, it's a good point, and that's the kind of difficulty in drafting this plan, because although the IJB, it would almost be easier if the Council and the Health Board did issue savings targets to the IJB to make it more real. But I think as we're seeing the management accounts and we're seeing this vast overspent quarter after quarter, I guess that's the trigger for IJB members to be challenging that and wanting reports back on redesign projects and asking for timelines when is you're going to actually see a difference to this figures. And again, when you're feeding into the annual planning cycle, I know Brian for NHS has got a savings target on his services. So how I see that working is if there's redesign work being generated in the NHS, that'll flow through into IJB seminars. And if there's any decisions being made that relate to IJB services, I would like to think that you as IJB would have to approve any such reductions to budgets. So projects that's impacting IJB budgets, the governance process around that would mean it would need to come through IJB for decision making, and then that would inform next year's budget and the medium-term financial plan. And I see that as a kind of a flow through. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, thanks, Carl. I suppose I'll let Christine in a minute. It's just that thing, isn't it, of sometimes you get told that there's problems and financially, and then the money disappears. So actually, why do we bother worrying about it when the money just gets put in, ultimately? Sorry, Christine.
Carl's actually said some of what I was going to say, which is really that it's the link back to strategic plan that's key. And what we struggle to do in real time is what the process that is meant to happen, which is very much that your strategic plan and looking at the new way you're going to do your strategic plan, what will then be your delivery plan and the directions that flow from that. To the two parties have a budget allocated with each bit of it that you then expect the party to deliver the service with. When you're doing that, then you're using it from the allocation that you've received from the parties for that year. The difficulty is when those are out of kilter. And so one way that we did use, or was used certainly in the early days of the IJB, was there were saving lines in. But that is a pretty blunt instrument at the end of the day, because it's not actually working through the plan and then costing it and then seeing how you measure up against the cost and then planning again and refining your predictions and your budget planning and so on. So I think that this is an area that we've struggled to get really good at. Perhaps the new structure for the plan will really help in the coming year, because I think that the way that that's been described in your earlier agenda item will be good. But again, I think it's something Elizabeth and Brian also attend local partnership finance team. We can take that away again and have another go around that circle, Carl, if that suits you and Brian, and just see if we can't get this ongoing dialogue going, whereby it's the plan and then how you use the funding allocation to fund the plan in your directions that in many ways works with that. And some ways, as I say, having a savings line doesn't necessarily help, but it's how you make sure that you're having that good dialogue and each recognizing the tensions and pressures that we have, which, as I absolutely agree, are shared tensions and pressures that we all have to work on. But the plan will be key, and how the IJB is directing that the services should be provided, and then the parties being able to fund appropriately. And when there's a mismatch, then having that good dialogue so that you then manage to marry it up again and get the budget, the directions, the strategic plan all in alignment. Perfection. We should aim for nothing less. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Brian?
Thanks, Chair. I suppose my point is a little bit, there's a bit of process around it, but there's also a little bit about just the IJB itself and the funding and the partnership and where we are with that. I think from a process perspective, we've had a lot of conversations around the drafting of a strategic commissioning plan, as Christine quite rightly said and Carl alluded to, about how we maybe move away some of the semantics around what we're trying to do from a value perspective. And we did have a really good conversation at the last strategic planning group about that previous target of being financially sustainable and moving that to how do we demonstrate best value in everything that we do, whether that's value to the community of Shetland in the services that we're providing, or value to our staff, or value, the whole way along. And I think if we maybe change the focus slightly and everything, whether it's a direction, whether it's a change plan, whether it's anything, we're being scrutinised on how we're going to demonstrate best value in anything that we're doing, and it's maybe just changing the culture slightly there. So that's the process. The other bit, I think, is from that whole last item where we said that the last plan has stood us in good stead and our integration has moved on quite significantly. I think from that is about that relationship that's been built between the Health and Social Care Partnership and the partners that are key organic elements of that partnership. And I think, I think as Carl's written into the plan, we are under no illusion of the financial pressures that both the council and the health board will be under in the next 5 years. We had budgets presented to council yesterday. We were all aware of what that means for drawn reserves, etc., etc. So I think just even through that relationship, we're well aware that both partners are under that financial pressure, and we've got a part to play in that. And I think that's just from that, just where we are as an IJB, we can actually have that conversation. As Christine said, a local partnership finance team, that we're aware that we've got to play a part, and I think I think that in itself will go some way just to maybe mitigate some of that risk you've been talking about.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, everyone. Any further questions on this one? No? Okay, any discussion? Although I'm aware we've discussed a lot in our prep tonight. I think it was really useful to have that discussion, and I just want to say thank you, Carl, for your paper and your presentation of it. I've got it very straightforward and easy to understand, so thanks for that. And we know that there's challenges, but we also know that it could be worse. Okay.
Can we move in a second or something?
Yeah. Is somebody happy to move any second? I'm happy to move.
I'm happy to second.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the IJB Business Programme and IJB Action Tracker 2021 to 2022. Right.
Thanks, Chair. This is just the routine the conversation about the remaining business for this financial year, we're hoping that we'll have accomplished most of our business that we had planned throughout the year by the next 2 IJB. So there's an IJB on the 9th of March, which will be focused solely on directions, and then the final IJB on the 24th of March will be looking at the budget, the approval of the strategic commissioning plan, and some of the outstanding scheme of integration kind of work that we're striving to get done by the end of this year. Just to say, we do have an SDS audit report to come. It's just been drafted at the moment, so that would be something we would want IJB cited on. And the 3-year joint workforce plan. It was due on the 31st of March, and we had planned to slot it in our business before then, but it's now been extended to the 31st of July, so that will be in the next year of meetings that we will bring that as a report to board. With respect to the action planner, everything seems to be progressing fine. I've taken a few items off that have been completed in the last cycle, and there's a few more being completed this time, and there's nothing of significant kind of risk or of note on the business plan or the action plan.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on the business programme or action tracker? I'm not seeing any hands up. I think when you glance back over all the meetings that we've had over the past year, and you see the amount of business that we have got through, I think it's a real credit to everybody that whilst services have been under significant pressure and our staff are really working incredibly hard to do their day job, they're also managing to complete all these elements of work that we've asked of them. So I would just like to say a huge thank you to everybody working in health and social care just now. I know it can't be easy, and I know lots of my friends work in social care and they're having a really difficult time. I know it's hard going. So I do think that I wish everybody all their thanks for everything they're doing. And yeah, thank you. And I have no questions on this. No? Any discussion? No? That concludes our meeting today. So thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance. And we will see you at the seminar next week. It's been a long week, what can I say? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Bye.